Good afternoon once again, colleagues. As I've mentioned earlier, my name is Kosiye Tuntuli. I'm from the Research Capacity Development Unit at the Postgraduate School. I would like to welcome you to today's workshop, Critical Evaluation Skills for Research Proposals under the Faculty of Education. This is a collaboration with the Faculty of Education, and I would like to thank Prof. Sarita and as well as Dr. Lorenzo David for organizing this workshop. We are honored to have Prof. Sarita, who is the Vice Dean at the Faculty of Education, Research and Innovation. Prof, thank you so much for honoring our invite and organizing this workshop, as well as sharing the invites with other colleagues who have joined us today. Before we move on, I would like to let you know or let you aware that this workshop is recorded. We will share the recording of this workshop with the faculty, as well as it will be uploaded on our platforms, which is the module platform as well as the RCT management system. So we usually share the recording as well as the presentation after 3 days of the workshop. Before we can move forward, I would like to go through some few housekeeping rules. Please feel free to use the chat to ask questions or raise your hand to engage in discussion. I will enable all your mics, colleagues. So if you do have a question, just raise a hand, or alternatively type under the chat or under Q&A. I will notify our facilitator or presenter that someone has raised a hand or has a question under the chat. I will be also sharing a feedback form under the chat, which I request you colleagues to fill in. It takes about 3 minutes. We value your contribution or your feedback. So the feedback form helps us in terms of improving our service delivery, as well as to give feedback to our facilitators for taking their time in facilitating these kinds of workshop. Once I have enabled all your mics, please, colleagues, make sure that there is no background noise that is coming from your side unless you are speaking or asking a question or making a contribution. So without any further waste of time, I would like to introduce our facilitator, Dr. Lorenzo David. I'll just go through his bio. Dr. Lorenzo is currently a coordinator at the Research Capacity Development Unit at the Postgraduate School, University of Johannesburg. Dr. David was recently awarded a PhD in biochemistry for his assessment of transferring tech gold palladium and gold palladium bimetallic nanoparticles and their potential for anti-cancer drug delivery at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. By adopting a holistic approach to education, Dr. Lorenzo hopes to inspire students to achieve personal and academic success with a hands-on and learner-centric approach to value-based learning. Thank you so much to Dr. Lorenzo for taking this time to facilitate this workshop. As I've mentioned earlier, colleagues, if you do have a question, we have colleagues who are from Faculty of Education who have a lot of experience in the industry, who will be happy to answer your question. If a question is posed, Dr. Lorenzo, I think colleagues as well can answer some of the questions. So feel free, colleagues, if you do have a question, your question will be answered. Just raise a hand and ask a question, or alternatively, you can type under the chat. Thank you once again for attending this workshop, and thank you to our organizers, Faculty of Education, as well as to our Professor Sarita for organizing this workshop. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the efforts of engaging with other colleagues as well. So I now hand over to Dr. Lorenzo David, who will be taking us through to this presentation of today. If you do have a question, colleagues, just type under the chat, or if you do have any contributions, we know that some of us here have a lot of experience, so you can just type under the chat or raise a hand if you do have some contributions or inputs towards the presentation. Thank you once again for joining in. I now hand over to Dr. Lorenzo David. Thank you.
Thank you, Nkosi. Firstly, we'd like to say welcome, colleagues. I hope you all are well. We'd like to thank you for making time on a Friday afternoon to join this session. A special thank you to Prof. Ramsrup as well for for endorsing this and and guiding some of the content in which will be presented here in terms of the theme. So thank you, Prof. We really appreciate it. We hope today is going to be an engaging session. So what I would do now is just share my screen and then hopefully, Mr. Nkosi, please let me know once again if we're able to see the screen as well as um, the transitions.
We can, Dr. David. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so once again, welcome everyone. Today's workshop will be focused on critical evaluation skills for research proposal, and obviously this is a bit more specific to the Faculty of Education. So at the start of this presentation, I'd just like to go and highlight some of the key areas which we'd like to hopefully discuss and address. So we hope to cover these points in this presentation, which will include techniques to critically evaluate research proposals, also some of the new approaches in terms of providing feedback to improve proposal quality. Now, this involves providing feedback to our students. We're going to move on to conceptualization of critical evaluation in the context of academic writing, as well as evaluation criteria for a research proposal. Thereafter, we'll go through academic writing strategies. How do we go about guiding our students? For many people who've been in academia for a while, some very senior members of staff, academic writing may come very naturally to them. But I think when we are providing feedback, especially to our students, we have to understand that they don't have that same base knowledge. So therefore, the feedback that we provide them will have to be tailored. And obviously, we will learn as we go along as well. We're going to touch on critical reading, which is very important, especially when it comes to analyzing these sorts of texts. And then we're going to go on to providing some feedback. How do we go about providing feedback and basically highlighting some of the new areas or new approaches in terms of feedback as a dialogue, between yourself and your student. What are the advantages of it in terms of the students of today, as well as we will end with supervised student publication practices in terms of if you have a student and you would like, obviously you would like their work to be published, how do we go about ensuring that in the planning phase of this, that we are able to meet the deadlines in terms of when the paper will be submitted and obviously taking all of these factors into consideration as well. So jumping straight into the presentation, I think it's important for us to start off with asking the question, what makes a strong research proposal? Now, depending on the faculty and department that you're in, there can be various different aspects which lay into this. However, I think there's some common themes that we can find. I think the first one would be a research proposal should have a clear research question or a creative inquiry, And the reason being of this, there must be a point to the study. We understand that when it comes to a student undertaking such a study, they obviously, we always wanted to be value in it. So the research question should be clear from the proposal. It not only is good that it appears in the proposal, but it also improves the understanding of the student. And I always take it back, or I take it back to when I was a student and I was writing my first research proposal. To be honest, I had no idea why it was needed. In my mind, it's like my supervisor knows what I'm doing. Why do I have to write this out? But towards the end of the degree, as a student, you realize that research proposal obviously guides your entire project. So if there are misunderstandings in the formulation of your research proposal, what does that mean for the rest of your study? So above and beyond, this being used to allow a student to gain access and complete a study, it also allows them to clarify certain issues that they may be having. I think a strong research proposal should also have a clear understanding. It should present the background. What is the background of the research area? And obviously that leads into the research problem. It should have a strong theoretical framework. So we are hoping this leads into the next point, which would be critical engagement with the literature. A good research proposal will demonstrate that the student has good knowledge of their area that they're undertaking for a study, that they are engaging with the material, that they are reading widely, and it just allows them to obviously increase their knowledge on a particular research area. It should be well articulated, and obviously the methodology should be well designed as well. So the methodology that we choose should help us to answer whatever the research question is. It should provide data in that regard. It also is used to identify and highlight deficiencies in the literature. So a good research proposal in your lit review should actually, identify the gaps that exist in the literature. And something which is, equally as important would be in terms of the timeline and the feasibility. Now, in this regard, we know that sometimes when students come in, and myself, I include myself in this group. When I started my studies, I wanted to do this. I was reading all these nice papers, and I'm like, I want to do all of these different experiments. And then when you actually go and speak to your supervisor, you see, in terms of time, even 3 years may not be enough for you to actually complete all of this without working 7 days a week. So I think taking in terms of their timelines and feasibility, this is also something that we do seriously consider. Okay, so what are some of the critical skills required when we evaluate a research proposal? Now, once again, I'll say for many of us who are, young and emerging academics, these may not necessarily be things that we automatically think of. So the first one would be analytical reading and critical thinking. So when we are reading a research proposal, are we reading beyond, the superficial layer of sentence construction or grammar or spelling? Because at the end of the day, the research proposal is actually telling a story of what this project is going to do. So we need to be able to critically or analytically read and critically think on the topic to be able to provide good feedback and obviously guiding the direction of the study. When we are evaluating a research proposal, we obviously need to show attention to detail. And this obviously is something that can't be rushed. So when we're reading through it, we want to make sure, is the statement factually correct? Does this align with the methods? Is this method correct? And will it produce the correct data, or the correct type of data for me to answer my research question? I think also a key skill when it comes to evaluating a research proposal is your ability to provide constructive feedback. Now, if we look throughout the years, and maybe if we speak to, scholars from years ago or even academics from years ago, when I spoke to my previous professor, he would tell me the type of feedback that he would get on his thesis, and it was not always constructive. It was just this is what you should improve on, this is wrong, or something along those lines. So I think if we're looking in terms of feedback, the approaches to feedback is starting to evolve in terms of how do we address feedback and what do we see the point of feedback as being. So our ability to actually effectively communicate our ideas and our suggestions to our students actually plays a key role in allowing them to shape this research proposal. I think it obviously is important for us to always show fairness, objectivity, and also have an ethical awareness when it comes to evaluating a research proposal. Now, I do understand that many of the students within South African universities, they will come in, and if they're pursuing their higher degrees, they will generally be some sort of project or a project within a certain framework that exists that they will thereafter be able to, to modify. But I think that in terms of ethical awareness is something that we should just keep at the back of our mind as well. Is a particular protocol or questionnaire or a certain method of data collection, is it ethical? And there's various different aspects that we can talk on that as well. I think when it comes to these academic documents, your ability or your decision making and problem solving skills should come to the fore, because when you are reading a student's proposal, you have literally a very short period of time to actually decide, is this correct or not? Should we move in direction A versus direction B? So your ability to make decisions actually comes to the front, as well as when you are reviewing in terms of your panel, your interpersonal as well as your collaborative skills. So if you're reviewing this with a few other members of staff, your ability to discuss, certain disagreements also comes into play. And I think that leads into academia as a whole. We don't work in silos. We always work with one another. So now that we've identified some of the skills that we should possess and that we can work on, I think that it's important for us to kind of identify some of the common issues when it comes to these research proposals. So some of the key themes that we notice would be, firstly, a lack of focus or scope. Now, you may have given the student obviously clear direction in terms of this is what the outcomes of the study should be. However, somewhere along the line between you speaking it, the student hearing it, and them writing it, there seems to be some sort of misalignment. So we need to ensure that there is always focus and obviously the scope of the study. We need to also ensure that there's no misalignment in terms of the aims, objectives, and questions. And this often leads into the fact that many students coming in, and I don't want to make a general statement, but I'll say students coming in, especially from undergrad to honors and beyond, sometimes don't have a clear understanding what is exactly the aim or objective or my research question. How, if they know what it is, then they can formulate something better. So I think our feedback in this regard is quite important. We also need to ensure that there is, some of the common issue is there's weak alignment between the questions as well research questions and your methodology. So your methodology, we all understand, is basically how are we going to perform the study to get the data to answer the questions for our particular research area. So we need to ensure that there's strong alignment between these two sections. At the end of the day, we would not want a student, and a student would not want to go and spend hours in a lab or collecting data only for the data to not be applicable or completely applicable to their study. Something that comes across quite often would be weak justification and context. So if they are identifying a research problem, they may not fully expand on why the study is important, as an example. So their ability to interact with the literature and obviously bring that into their proposal, subsequent papers and thesis is very important. Something that we identify quite often would be students' use or overuse of complex jargon or even using vague language. And I think this is where, from my personal opinion, this is where some of the misunderstandings come in. When students come into higher degrees or postgraduate degrees, we tell them that for academic writing you have to be formal, and they're like, okay, fine. So formal means I will have to use a bit more complex words, and then they feel that the more complex a piece of writing sounds, the better it is. But that's not necessarily the case. So I think our ability to translate to our students, even through feedback of their proposal, to say that you can say something or discuss a complex topic in a simple manner, because at the end of the day, we want our research to be as widely accessible as possible, not only a small percentage of the population to be able to read it. Some other common issues that we have identified would be missing citations or poorly reviewed literature. And these are like easy fixes that we can guide the students as we're going through. So these are just some points for us to keep an eye out in terms of what are the common themes that run through these research proposals when we're reviewing them. So once again, we speak about inadequate literature review as well as your theoretical foundation. They're not reading widely enough. They're not providing this information in the proposal. And the last one would be poor project planning. So sometimes we think as humans we can do more than what is possible within a given amount of time. So I think the onus is upon us at this point to actually guide our students into what is possible and what isn't within the specific time frame, as well as in terms of feasibility. So we'd like to discuss a bit about critical evaluation. And before I go on here, I'd just like to say if anyone has a question or a contribution, please feel free to unmute your mic, or you can even just pop a question in the chat box. We like to have discussion with members of the audience. We also learn from one another. So please feel free to jump in at any time. So moving back to the presentation, we're going to touch on what is critical evaluation. And some of the key aspects when it comes to critical evaluation would be it needs to be active, objective analysis of a proposal's strengths and weaknesses. So when we are reading it, we need to make sure that we are unbiased in our approach, and this biasness can form, and you get different types of biasness, but biasness can perform even if it's an area that is, very similar to maybe a study that you did previously. So we need to ensure that it is objective. The next one is that when it comes to critical evaluation, we need to ensure that the research is rigorous. Is the student performing, you know, going in depth in terms of the experimental procedure, shall we say, or data collection? Is the type of data and is their methods that they're using logical? And also, is the information they present credible? That leans into their literature review. Are they using low recent sources? Are they using peer-reviewed sources, etc.? So I think when we critically evaluate, it also allows us to identify unclear arguments, gaps that may exist in the research proposal, as well as biases. And this is good because it allows us to do this before the study begins. So in this regard, it should make the rest of the journey hopefully a little better. So when we come to evaluation criteria for research proposals, we split it up into two parts. And I think the first one is going to look at it more on a, for lack of a better word, a superficial level. So if we look at part one, when we're reading a proposal, we want to ensure that the writing is clear and concise. Is the arguments the student is making, am I able to understand them? Am I able to understand their train of thought? And do the arguments actually have a logical flow? We do understand sometimes that this may not be very simple when you're starting off academic writing, but this is where our ability to guide the students in terms of our feedback comes into play. There should also be logical coherence. So we understand that every research proposal, each faculty will have their own structure. However, it needs to follow, it needs to be structured. Each section should flow logically from one to the other. And then we move on to in terms of how are they linking up different sections as well? How are they um, writing out this proposal? When it comes to a PhD study, we understand that originality and the significance of your study is very important. And for a PhD study, it needs to contribute to new knowledge or fill a gap. And we all know this. I just wanted to add it into the presentation. But I think when we are evaluating proposals, we need to ensure that all of these criteria are met, because at the start of a project, when the student has a couple of months to sort this out, it's better for us to iron out these details now. And we understand when you are performing a PhD study, the um, the emotions that come up when you have to keep checking, has this actually been done or published in other papers as well? So I think ensuring that the project is completely original and has, significance in terms of the area is very important. The next area we'd like to discuss would be in terms of research questions or your hypothesis. Um, these need to be well formulated. They need to obviously align with the topic, and we need to make sure that the student is able to structure them correctly as well. And obviously are using the correct methods once again to be able to answer these questions. When we move on to the next part, we see that as we start to look a bit deeper in terms of these research proposals, we will have to obviously evaluate the literature review, and here we need to ensure that it's thorough, that it is they consulting with the correct sorts of papers, and there's also critical synthesis of their sources as well. And this ties into other sections, like other aspects of it. When we're reading through a literature review, there needs to be a coherent flow. It needs to work down to a particular point which focuses on their research area. The the literature that they are presenting, that they are using to, to motivate for the study, needs to actually identify a particular gap that is arising, and therefore your study or that study is going to be able to answer questions that's going to fill that gap. So these are all areas that we need to make sure that exist in their research proposal. Moving on, when we are evaluating the methodology, we need to make sure that there is appropriate design as well as design and methods for the questions. So if I take it in terms of my own research, when I was designing the methodology, I had my research question was essentially, would this particle be able to kill cancer cells? And obviously, the methods that I had to choose had to answer that question. So, in a similar way, we need to make sure that the methods that they're using are appropriate, because sometimes when we go into these niche areas of studies, there needs to be tweaks to the methodology as well, so that we answer that specific question, or maybe combination of different methods. Something which is obviously we've highlighted previously, which would be in terms of feasibility. So we need to ensure that there is a realistic timeline for the students. Is a student able to complete X amount of work within the 2 years for masters or 3 years for PhD? Do the experiments or the resources that they require, will our budget be able to provide this, as well as in terms of the scope of the work? So as we're moving through the presentation, we can see that I think someone's mic is unmuted.
Sorry for that, Doc.
No problem.
Someone's mic was on by
Okay.
that time. Apologies.
No problem. I think in terms of, and then obviously in the end, if depending on the type of study that we're doing, we need to ensure that there's ethical compliance. And I do understand that all of these points that we're discussing, that we would have meetings with the students, so in terms of ethics, but I think when we are evaluating these proposals, we need to ensure that the conversations that we've had with them and maybe email communication, it is translated in this proposal before it moves forward. So academic writing would not be a new thing for many people in the session. I don't think anyone. But just to have a quick recap in terms of, in terms of academic writing and how do we translate this to the students as well. So we understand that any academic piece needs to be well structured as well as well argued. Each statement or statistic that you provide needs to have a corresponding reference, and we need to make sure the students understand this. When it comes to referencing, sometimes it can take a while for students to, to adopt it, shall we say. Then moving on, in terms of the academic writing, whenever we're doing this, we need to ensure that we are writing clearly and concisely. We need to avoid the use of unnecessary language, for lack of a better term. We need to eliminate unnecessary words. And the reason why I put this in here is, when it comes to a research proposal, we understand this is the first academic piece that a student is submitting to us. If we are able to provide clear and concise feedback, guiding them in terms of the do's and the don'ts, what are they lacking, what are they doing well, what this does is it forms a foundation in the student's mind. And by doing this, they will take these same comments, hopefully, and move on to, so when you are reviewing their thesis, they are not going to make the same mistake when it comes to referencing. Or we hope they don't make the same mistake, but it will be obviously fresh in their minds. So that is how we obviously will end up saving and working more efficiently as we go through the process. We all understand that when it comes to academic writing, we need to use a formal tone. And from some writing consultations that we have been doing, we've identified some trends in terms of, when we tell students that in academic writing you have to use a formal tone, automatically certain individuals will assume that it needs to be complex, or they need to use more complex words to make it sound more academic. And what we have noticed, and something we always motivate for, would be, when you're writing an academic document, be it a proposal, a journal article, or even a thesis, you can write in simple language, and many of us know this. So we need to be able to translate this to the student as well. At the end of the day, in a personal view, I look at academic writing as form of where you are narrating a story. You are explaining with regards to your study. You're providing background. You're giving how you're going to achieve, how you're going to carry out the experiments. You presenting your results. You're providing a discussion as well as you are concluding on this entire topic. So you are essentially providing you are narrating a story, and we need to ensure that the audience obviously is able to follow. So in the same time, when we are writing, we need to make sure, yes, use formal tone, but at the same time, use simple language and ensure that the clarity and flow of the document is there. It's important for students, obviously, not to use contractions and to avoid writing in the second person, and this just ties in with academic writing rules. The last point would be coherence. And in this regard here, we need to use clear topic sentences. We need to ensure that there is a logical flow, within our paragraphs as well as between paragraphs. So we start to formulate um, this piece of writing. So for many of us, critical reading techniques, this is something I found to be quite interesting. Many of us would do it without even realizing it. So when it comes to critical reading, we essentially want to read obviously deeper. We want to get the deeper meaning. We want to try and form relationships and identify issues that exist within a particular piece of literature. So how do we go about doing this? So there's four main points that we have here. Now this is for when we are reviewing our particular research, the research proposal. The first thing is going to do, we're going to preview. So we think about it in terms of if you are completely new to a research area, how are you going to start understanding? Firstly, you're not going to go and read the most complex paper that's out there. You're going to probably go on to, do a quick search either on Google or something, and you're going to get a basic understanding of what is this area of study. So we will adopt the same approach when it comes to our research proposals. So what we will do, we'll first skim like the abstract, the headings, the figures, and this allows us to basically get an understanding of the overall structure, where the student may be going wrong, and it allows you to formulate this first impression and how you are going to actually evaluate this deeper. Then, depending on your style of review, you will annotate actively. So we have, I know certain lecturers who only work on paper and they will correct with a pen, and obviously, other academics feel much more comfortable doing it in track changes or comments. So as you go through the research proposal, it's important for us to ask ourselves questions. Highlight some of the main ideas and the keywords. Make notes of questions to the comments. Does this make sense? Is this the correct approach that they're using? Is this reference suitable? These types of comments, which will actually allow us to formulate our feedback moving onwards. As we're reading, we need to evaluate these arguments. We need to identify each claim's evidence. If a student is making a key assumption, if they're saying gold nanoparticles cures cancer, they need to obviously be evidence for them making such a claim, either in a proposal or their paper. And by doing this, by having this discussion with ourselves in terms of the research proposal and critically evaluating it, we are able to identify logical gaps, look for gaps in the flow, as well as to ensure that there is logical flow in their argument. So, like we keep saying, it's always important for us to identify these potential stumbling blocks early on before letting the student go too far into the study. And at the end, depending once again on your style, you can summarize in questions. So after reading a particular section, you can paraphrase it in your mind and ask, what did the author assume? What is missing? And I think that's the key area we'd like to focus on. So when we're reading a student's proposal, we want to see what they've missed out on, or maybe what they have not done correctly. We want to guide them on the correct way, obviously, writing a proposal. So we're moving on to providing and receiving feedback. And we've noticed recently that there is a push towards how we are addressing students in our feedback. And I think it all goes back to, we can bring it back to providing feedback. When we're doing this, what is the point? Is it merely to correct when someone is doing something wrong, or is also to guide and inform so that the next draft that you get does not have the same errors? So yes, when it comes to providing feedback, it can be very tedious and it can take a lot of time for you to write individual comments going through the proposal or through the article, but it does end up saving us time at the end. So in our feedback, we need to be specific. We need to highlight where the student is going wrong, or maybe where they're not adhering to academic tone, etc. And then we need to be constructive. We need to say, a suggestion would be for you to structure the sentence like this, or a suggestion would be for you to add a reference or to add a statistic. And in doing so, the more information we provide, the student is able to process this, and obviously their next draft should be better as well. Whenever we're providing this feedback, we need to focus obviously on the work, and we need to be able to find a balance between praise with actionable suggestions. So when it comes to feedback, we don't just want to highlight what the student is doing wrong. I feel that it's important for us to highlight what they're doing right. And the reason being for this, if you read through a particular page and you see one paragraph is actually written very well, it aligns to all of the requirements in terms of academic writing. So what you can do is if you leave a comment there and say, you know, um, structure is good, shall we say, or nicely written, then the student can use that as a template in terms of other changes they need to make throughout their document as well. So I think it's just the way that we see feedback and how we go about having this discussion with our students. So an interesting, I attended a workshop recently where they were discussing specifically on feedback, and they suggested the use of questions. So if we think about it in our own context, if someone tells us or we get feedback and it just says change this, change that, add reference, but there's no context. We don't understand why exactly we are making these changes. Chances are the next time we write a draft, we will replicate some of those mistakes. So rather than just give, instruction, what we can do is, maybe pose a question. Have you considered, or a suggestion would be, and by doing so, we provide a bit more further feedback to the student, more context, and they're able to understand where exactly they're going wrong. I think it's sometimes easy for us when we are evaluating these research proposals to, you know, it's difficult for us to put ourselves in the position of the student. So the student does not have the same amount of knowledge as obviously an academic or an experienced academic when it comes to this type of writing. So we need to guide them through the process and obviously empower them as we go along as well. And this is a topic we have to be cautious about. When it comes to feedback, there is a push recently in terms of, or rather, I've noticed a trend in terms of feedback as a dialogue between a supervisor and a student, where the dynamic is in certain universities is actually starting, in certain departments is starting to shift. So what we've noticed after discussions with these academics was that they will write a document, and the student will write a document and they will send it for review. The supervisor will provide comments throughout their document, and when they email back the student with the corrections, they tend to set up a meeting. And it doesn't have to be a long meeting, because the reason being, and they let us know that they want to provide context for their comments, because obviously if you're just reading words on a screen, um, there's no context behind it, and students, the way they receive it may be not, they may not receive it as easily. So I think by having this sort of discussion in terms of the student and making feedback as a dialogue, explaining where exactly they're going wrong, it will take more time, but I think it will also be more efficient in the long run. And these are just suggestions and from research. Um, so if we aim for two-way discussion to support the students, we also are supporting independent thinking, because they are able to actually discuss why exactly they decided to take, their proposal or this writing in this particular direction as well. And in this process, when if we are receiving feedback or in this dialogue, we need to be able to listen openly. You know, Ask clarifying questions because sometimes the perspective of the student and the supervisor will not align. And therefore, we need to ask these clarifying questions. And importantly, we can't take criticism personally. Feedback at the end of the day helps us all to improve, and we are all learning at all points. Okay, so we actually are approaching the end of the presentation, but I quickly want to go through in terms of supervisors and publications. I'm just going to put this up here. So we understand that many students, well, we would like our students to publish their work, but how do we work this into the plan of when we are obviously creating a timeline for our project? So one of the most basic steps we can speak about first is going to be plan early. And it's important for us to discuss our goals for publishing together at the start of the project. Now, this can do two things. Number one, it allows the student to understand the actual time frame they have in which to complete the work to submit to a journal. And secondly, it also motivates us as students to know that, this work is actually going to be published. We're going to have a publication against our name, etc. So being able to plan early is essential, and this involves creating your timeline, as well as identifying suitable journals for your particular area. Authorship agreements, and this is something which I think, if I'm not mistaken, we had a workshop with the legal representatives in the legal department. They were speaking about in terms of supervisor-student agreements, as well. Now we'll talk about authorship agreements. So at the start of the discussions, it's important to define what a significant contribution is, and basically the author order upfront. If we look at some of the international guidelines into what constitutes or what constitutes an author. To be considered for an author on a paper, you need to be involved in every aspect of the project. So this is from conceptualization to conceptualization, design, carrying out the experiments, collecting your results, writing the paper, formatting it um, for the journal, etc. So obviously we will align with UJ's guidelines in terms of authorship. In terms of a writing timeline, I think it's important for us to discuss with the students that writing a paper does take time. So it's important for us to set milestones in terms of our drafts as well as our review sessions. And importantly, we need to take into consideration the processing time by that specific journal. So I've had experience with some journals where it was literally done in 2 months. And I've also had experience with other journals which took like 4 to 6 months, I think sometimes over, which was a bit extreme in some cases, but 6 months sometimes. So if you have a PhD student and obviously you understand that they need to publish, we need to work in this processing time taken by the journal as much as possible, because we'd like it to be published, not just sent in for review at that point. I think moving on, in terms of supervisors and publications, we can look at the document contribution. So if we have multiple students who's working on a particular paper, we need to keep shared records of all of the tasks, what everyone's contribution is going to be. And lastly, we're going to speak about clarity and ethics. So at all times, we all will always follow institutional authorship as well as ethics guidelines when it comes to our research projects. So to wrap up this presentation, I think when it comes to critically evaluating a research proposal, there's a few key areas we can touch on. The first one would be many faculties will have some sort of rubric or a guiding document in terms of how we go about reviewing a proposal. So we will align very closely to this, and we are also able to develop our own little checklist into what needs to be present on this research proposal. It can be a bit more detailed, according to your style. We need to ensure that when we are reviewing a research proposal, we are asking probing questions. We need to make sure the student understands, what is going on, as well as asking questions such as, is the method appropriate for the aim? Is this method going to allow me to, collect the correct data to allow me to answer my research question? We understand that our approach needs to always be unbiased, and this is something that we all do, in that we need to separate the content critique from personal opinion, and we need to make sure whatever we state in there is factual and obviously aligns with commonly accepted practices. And the last point would be, it is important for us to balance, the criticism that we're offering in these research proposals with constructive suggestions, because in the constructive suggestions is where a student will grow. So as much as we understand the importance of a research proposal in enabling a student to register and like to conduct a study, we also at the same time, parallel to that, we want to ensure, each of us obviously wants to ensure that we are also helping the student develop. So that is where constructive suggestions comes in. We need to make sure that the feedback that we're giving the students are able to understand it, they understand why they have to make these changes, and it, at the end of the day, allows them to be better upon the next draft, which essentially will mean that we can focus in other areas to review, maybe that to improve the text even further. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for attending this session. I will We'll leave the floor open for any questions or any discussions if anyone has, and I'll hand over back to Mr. Nkosi. Thank you, Nkosi.
Thank you so much, Dr. David, for such a very informative presentation. Colleagues, now the floor is open for questions. If you do have a question or any contribution, just unmute your mic and ask your question or make your contribution. Alternatively, you can post your question under the chat or under Q&A. And yeah, Dr. Lorenzo and colleagues will attend to your question. Thank you so much, colleagues. Yes, Prof, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. David, as well. I think there's quite a few students in this particular workshop, and I think it's important to also just emphasize with the students, if you are still in the proposal stages of your master's and your PhD, that there are specific timelines that you must adhere to. So for a master's, your proposal, you have 6 months from the date from January until by the end of June, your proposal should actually have served. And there's different levels of, once you've engaged with your supervisor, and Dr. David has given very, very valuable feedback on what's expected from a supervisor, but also what is expected from you. So although it's given a balanced view, I think as a student, you already have that lens when writing to say, my supervisor, or once my proposal is ready, it serves in a department, in a review committee where there's critical interrogation of what you've written to see whether your title, your topic, your aim, your research questions align. What is your theoretical or conceptual framework? How does your methodology align with your research questions, as well as your ethics in line with that as well? And of course, now that will take, it takes time, and you get your proposal back, and then you're supposed to be, strengthening it before it then serves at faculty higher degrees, where it's captured formally on the system with your title, with the name of your supervisor, and that as well. So please just keep in mind that you don't have an entire year to work on a proposal. For a master's student, you want to be done in 2 years. And if you're going to take an entire year with a proposal, it's going to hold you back from graduation. The same with the PhD, you are given 9 months. That proposal must serve at in the doctoral committee. Then you do your first doctoral seminar, and thereafter it's at faculty higher degrees that your proposal serves. So thank you. I thought it was important just to outline that, Dr. David.
No, thank you very much, Prof, for those insights. I think it's important for us to at least have an understanding of the processes, as a student, because I know for myself personally, as a student, I always thought I had more time than I actually did when it came to developing your proposals. So no, thank you, Prof. We appreciate that. I think there is a hand up from Stefan Govender.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm not sure if I'm audible.
Yep, no, we can hear you.
Great. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. It was very insightful and very informative, and it actually did assist me with where I am in my PhD proposal. So I just wanted to ask two questions. I'm not sure on the first one if anybody would be able to assist me, but I know Prof. Sarita is also here, so she may be able to assist. So the first question I actually have is there a timeline within which you have to publish an article? For example, if you publish your master's or if you finish your master's degree, is there a timeline within which you must um, do an article until
Mm-hmm.
such time it can maybe, or you would not be allowed to publish that information? Maybe would become
Oh,
outdated. And then the
yeah.
second question I have is on academic writing.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to find out, coming from UKZ and also myself,
Yeah.
we were often taught that um, academic writing is a higher form, one of the highest forms of writing.
Mm-hmm.
It goes against mediocre formal writing in a sense that there's a difference between mediocre formal writing and then academic writing is much more of an elevated art.
Yeah.
So I just want to find out because I think throughout the presentation it was noted that we have to constantly keep it simple, but
Mm-hmm.
then how do we, draw the line between formal and
Mm-hmm.
then academic writing? Where do we draw that line? I hope that it makes
Yeah.
sense. Thank you so much.
Okay. Prof, would you like to take the first question in terms of the
Mhm.
timeline?
Sure.
Okay, Prof.
Absolutely. That's a very, very good question with publications. And I'm sure you're referring to your master's study. What in the faculty we are trying to get right is that the moment you, in fact, your publications you should be writing your article while your study, your master's or your PhD is going on. We've had students that graduate with already 2 or 3 publications with their PhDs and same with masters. And the moment you leave, you submit, you got your assessor results, and you leave that standing for a year, 2 years. You can still publish from that, but beyond the 3-year period, depending on what the study was about, what the data was about, you're quite right. It may be dated, and you also, it's also kind of not you're not doing yourself any favors in that way because I can see you want to pursue academia. And this is for all students as well. It doesn't matter whether you want to stay in higher education, you're pursuing, maybe you're a teacher at a high school or a primary school. You want a publication on your CV, even if it's just a master's. And it holds so much of weight for you that you have published in an accredited journal. That already puts you on a completely different level whatsoever, in that particular area. So I'm not sure when last you finished your master's, but if it's in the last 2 years, go back, look at your data. You've already written this. It's just an art of how can I take my themes, how can I take my literature. Sometimes I just got to up my literature. My literature may have dated. There's lots of new things coming out, but my data I could still use and adapt. So it's still doable in that particular respect. And I would advise with your PhD that by the time, as soon as you start collecting your data, start start looking at uh, aspects. Take a theme at a time and look at, say, can I get a publication out of this? Can I look at this particular theme and get another publication out of this? So that by the time you graduate, because those are some of the rules as well, that you should publish a minimum of 2 from a PhD and 1 from a master's. And then, of course, Dr. David, let me just also just quickly talk about the academic writing skills that he was, and
Sure,
I
Prof.
know that that's your area of expertise as well. But, when it comes to academic writing, and why we say it's very different from formal writing. When you write in academia, it's not a matter of just reading literature and summarizing it, what the literature is saying. That's not what literature review is about. In your literature review, you should identify 3 or 4 key arguments that you want to address in your chapter 2, and of course address in line with your research questions. But when you are writing, it needs to be argumentative. So when I look at a particular study, I read up on 2, 3, or 4 different similar studies, then I start asking myself these questions. And that's where Dr. David spoke about the critical lens must come in. What's the similarities? And here I'm looking at when you interrogate each of these studies, look at where this is taking place, the context, look at what was the sample, what were the some of the findings, what were the recommendations, how would these particular findings align with your study. So you're going to track the similarities as well as the differences, and then you're going to make it in the form of an argument. So you're not just summarizing that this study did this and that study stated that, and this particular study. You want to make it argumentative to show. You want to highlight these are the gaps that seem to be recurring in the literature, or these were the learnings that seem to be coming through from these particular studies, and how it will enhance or strengthen your specific study in line with your research question. So, Dr. David, I'll hand over to you as well to take that forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Prof, I think there's a while that we have you on the, I think there's a question. Does the faculty have, I think
Have
it's
a
from,
postgrad handbook.
yes.
We don't have a handbook specifically because we have about 3 different centers, 4 different chairs, plus different departments, each with a specific foci. So when you look at a handbook for doctoral, you may find that the sciences, and you know that, Dr. David, that when you're doing a science research, you've
Yes,
got
yes.
specific theoretical lenses, and but we do have a proposal guideline process. Very, our documents are very clear. It's your supervisors have access to this. Submission guidelines, referencing, publication requirements are all with your specific supervisors. But I am going to look at how we can actually put together a Moodle, just for Faculty of Education to actually populate, because I think it's important for you to also have direct access instead of always having to ask your supervisor for this kind of information. So thank you very much for that question, Takulani. It's something that's on my to-do list.
Thank you, Prof. Okay, so Prof actually covered majority of more than most of what I was going to say. So what I will do is quickly share my screen, and then hopefully. So Prof, I think outlined it very nicely in terms of what is the difference between academic writing and our formal writing. And this is just a presentation which we did. I think it was a month or two ago. Academic writing, and it was done for the Faculty of Education. So quickly, not to take too much of a time, we understand the difference between the two forms is going to be the purpose, your tone, your language, like we said, formal versus informal. And I think that's been covered. You asked a question in terms of where do you draw the line between it being formal and obviously beyond that. So I think when it and still being simple. So the way I think about it and conceptualize it is that I always want what I'm writing to be easily understood, even if the person is not an expert in the subject. So when I say simple, I don't mean you can't use any of the common words that's used in your particular area. All I'm saying is that your argument should be clear and easy for the reader to understand. So generally speaking, if we go into, okay, so I'll speak about cancer research. If I want to explain a concept that this drug A it has the ability to cure cancer. Now, there's 2 ways that I can approach it. I can literally write it out slightly better than I've said it, and everyone will understand. Or I can go more in depth and bring in things such as mechanisms and cytotoxicity and all these terms which people in the field would understand. So I think that for me is where the distinction comes in. I understand that, we want to highlight our research and we want to obviously present it in a way that is that actually reflects the quality of the work. But for me, at the end of the day, whenever I'm writing anything for academia, I want to make sure that it is as widely accessible as possible. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, Stefan, but if not, then maybe you can ask a clarifying question. I can hopefully provide a bit more clarity on that.
No, no, that should suffice. Thank you very much, Doc, and
Okay,
Prof as well. Thank you very much.
thank you. Okay, Mr. Nkosi, we'll hand over back to you.
Thank you, Dr. David and Prof. I don't know if the colleagues still have questions. Colleagues, if you do have a question, just unmute your mic or alternatively type under the chat. In the meantime, I have shared the feedback evaluation under the chat. We kindly request you colleagues to take your 3 minutes and fill that feedback in. It helps us in terms of improving our service delivery as well as to share with our facilitators as to see where they can improve and what is it that they are doing best or better. So we ask you colleagues to take your 3 minutes and fill the feedback in. So I don't want to close anyone out. I'm just opening for the questions. If you still have a question, this is the platform. Just unmute your mic and ask your question. Okay, I see that I don't see any new hands or any new comment or question under the chat. Probably your closing, Prof. If okay, I see that there is a question on the chat. I hear Prof mention that one of the requirements for masters is at least one publication. Did I get that correctly? I think yes, you Prof did mention that. Yes. Thank you, Prof, for that prompt response. I'm not sure if anyone else has a question. Just type under the chat or just unmute your mic and ask your question. Okay, probably the question will come. But now, Prof, any last word from your side or any highlight from this presentation before we can officially close the session?
Thank you. And I just want to just add to the publications that it doesn't have to, your articles do not have to be published at the time of grad, but there must be evidence that you have submitted the article to a journal for publication when it serves at faculty higher degrees. You normally write with your supervisor. So just that, just to add that. And I'd like to extend a big thank you to the Postgraduate Center, especially to Dr. David as well for this. It was incredibly informative. Both students and staff that have been present here today as well would have learned and gained a lot from this. But I'm sure we will take this forward. It will be one of many workshops that we hope to do together with the Postgrad Center. Thank you very much, Dr. David.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. We really appreciate that. And yes, we're always happy to collaborate with you on these workshops. So thank you very much.
Well, I see another comment or question. Can we have a workshop particularly focused on proposal writing? Yes, we can arrange a workshop with the faculty, and we will be engaging with the faculty to arrange such workshops. We usually do approach faculties to arrange workshops at an early stage of the year that covers proposal writing. So our another portfolio which strictly deals with postgraduate students, we are offering those workshops for proposal writing, whereby we cover from all the faculties that we have within UJ. So you can access the recording. I think we have covered that at an early Feb with all the faculties. So you can access the recording in your module communities. Just access from module community. If you are a postgraduate student, it will be available under research masters and PhD student. That is where you will access all the recordings. So we have a workshop which was from Faculty of Education, which covered proposal writing. So by now you can access the recording. However, each and every year we approach faculties to provide those workshops. So yes, we provide workshops of that kind. So anyone with the question? Okay, I see that it's just positive comments. Thank you once again, colleagues, and to fellow students for making your time in attending this kind of workshop for today. I would like to thank our facilitator, Dr. Lorenzo David, and to Prof. Sarita for organizing this kind of workshop. We really appreciate, and we do hope and believe that the colleagues and the students who have attended this workshop have learned something and will take something to share with other colleagues and with other students as well. So the recording of this workshop will be available on the model communities, which is the postgraduate student and masters, as well as PhD model community. It will also be available under supervisor community as well as PDRF community. So we will also upload this to our RCT management system, which is the system that has been integrated with the ULink. You just log into ULink and you go to services. The last option is RCTMS. This is the platform whereby you will access all the previous recording, as well as you will be able to book for any upcoming workshops and see our events that we are providing here at the postgraduate school. So I'll just share the link for the RCTMS. We kindly request you to register your profile. If you are a staff member or a postgraduate student or a PDRF, you are more than welcome to register. Please make sure that you register with your UJ account. If you do have any question or any queries regarding that, you are more than welcome to send an email that I've shared under the chat. With that being said, thank you so much, colleagues, once again. I'm now officially ending this session. You can have a great day further. Thank you again to the Faculty of Education. We're looking forward to more workshop of this kind and in collaboration of this kind to help postgraduate students as well as researchers as large. So thank you so much, colleagues. You can have a great day further. I'm now officially closing the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.